With the recent moves Donald Trump has made and the U.S. in taking Nicolas Maduro, it signals something that we noticed a few weeks ago here at TPL. That's that there's a new defense strategy that really needs to be looked at that Donald Trump is already adhering to. Did he do something legal in Venezuela? Apparently, it doesn't matter. To talk more about this, man on the scene, as I like to think when it comes to these things, Paul Micucci, thanks for having this discussion with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, very, very interesting times, Mike, for sure.
Yeah.
And, you made a great point. So, when this happened, we all woke up Saturday morning and turned on our TVs, and it took me like 45 minutes. I sat there and, I usually have my morning coffee and get ready to go to the gym, and I'm sitting there and I'm listening and I'm thinking, is this for real? And about 45 minutes later, I went and sat in front of the TV. I thought, wow, this really happened. He did really go in and get the president of Venezuela and bring him out to New York. And it all had happened overnight.
It seemed almost like he overthrew a country and it wasn't within his reach to do so. Actually, that's where this conversation started, because literally the next day I'm on the phone to you saying, I don't even know if this is legal, Paul. Like, I don't know if he should have been able to do this.
Well, but he did, as you alluded to in the opening, he did give us notice before Christmas. And, we did, it was interesting. You were out of the studio. I called you and I said, you gotta read this national defense strategy because it's really wild. And they just released it to the public. And I said, I'm going to get Christoph to voice it over from the Western Hemisphere's perspective.
Right.
Okay. Western Hemisphere for everyone being the Americas, right? South America, North America. And I said, you really need to listen to this because it is very wild that he had actually said that he was going to follow the Monroe Doctrine and do this. So, what we're witnessing, and you're hearing it throughout the news and different podcasts, is we are watching basically a republic become an empire.
When you said that to me this morning, I wanted to, you want to say, hold on a sec.
Mm-hmm.
But really, in the end, that's what's happening here. And if you'll go, I'm sure, back in history where this has happened before.
The new Caesar.
He feels like he might be the new Caesar.
Sure. Well, he's done this, and he did do it without consulting his Congress.
I need to ask you about that, if you don't mind. Do you mind if we just push pause right there?
Sure.
How is he able to just seemingly sidestep Congress getting an opinion on whether or not he takes the leader of another country, whether the leader is meant to be deposed or not?
Well, so, U.S. politics, a lot larger in number of people, for sure. It's 535 politicians involved in the system. 100 senators and 435 House reps, Congress per se, right? He controls both. So quite frankly, he's centralized power in the presidential suite because right now he controls the Senate and the Congress. And so, and he rules it with a very iron hand. If you go against him, you're out. If you don't like what he's doing, you're out. And that is controlled through funds of election financing.
Right.
So quite frankly, if he doesn't think he wants you in the Congress or the Senate, he'll move that funding around to other members and other campaign and starve out your campaign. So a lot of it's done in it's a heavy-handed way of doing it, but that is American politics. In a lot of ways, it's Canadian politics too, but not as much. We don't have all the same things. So the power resides in the presidential office now. It is the executive office that now makes the decisions in this government. Again, that's why people are, saying it's an empire, because an empire is controlled by a single person. And elections then become really key, because that presidential person that steps into that power is really going to direct your country, substantially.
Now, an election in the case of the USA, an election could actually leave sort of a split Congress. The House could be split, but in this case, for the moment, for this presidential run, he has a runway that he can get on at any time, it seems.
Well, and by the time he gets there, quite frankly, the world will have changed. So in 3 years, the world is going to substantially change. the electoral will change. You know, the number of immigrants in the U.S. is declining. You know, that's the last night we're watching on the news, you know, the things going on in Minnesota and the people being deported and, you know, as ICE goes in and takes people out and removes people, it's changing, right? His doctrine in the home in the United States is changing significantly, and that's going to change the electorate of the United States.
Yeah,
which then could substantially increase their chances of winning another majority government in both chambers.
Unless he does something so devastating that you know, popular vote changes dramatically.
Yes, yeah, but that's where we are for now. So now,
but if he cleans up immigration,
yeah,
and he brings more jobs home, and the economy ticks up just a little bit,
which it did, you know, it did before Christmas. He's you know, record increase in GDP.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say that that's not a good approach as a president, that he seems to be doing what he said he was going to do. I don't think personality-wise everybody likes him. I'm certainly not a huge fan of his personality. I think diplomacy works a little nicer, but this seems to be his method.
Yeah, it is. Well, you know, and look at Venezuela. So let's take this, because I think, you know, going back to that, we really want to take a look at the Monroe Doctrine. So, you know, we heard about it before Christmas. They came out with it and they said, okay, in the Western Hemisphere, here's basically what we're going to follow. And the Monroe Doctrine was a doctrine from 1823. And now in its modernized form, I'm just going to read this for a minute. It updated doctrine asserts U.S. primacy in the Western Hemisphere, aiming to exclude non-hemispheric powers, particularly China and Russia. So there you go. So, you know, he you know, when they went into Venezuela for the first time, he didn't talk about the safety or democracy. He basically talked about the fact that he wanted to control the oil. And it wasn't hidden. He didn't sugarcoat it.
I said to you, I'm a genius. I know what's going on here. It has nothing to do with terrorism. It's really that he wants this oil. And you just nodded at me like, yeah, we all know that.
Yeah. Well, and you know,
but that's because he said it. He took it already.
Right. But you remember in the Middle East, it was always, you know, they used all these in years past, these guys' explanations of why they had to insert themselves in the Middle East. It was about oil, right? So
this time he said, we're going after the oil in a government that's corrupt.
Exactly. And he wants China out of that equation. So in the Western Hemisphere, he does not want the Venezuela oil to be controlled by the Chinese.
Well, he's going to use it, I think, in America.
Oh, yeah, of course he is. He's going to use it in America, and he's going to sell it. Honestly, he's going to sell it to the Chinese. He's always said that.
Yeah.
But he's not selling it at a discount.
And he's not letting it go through the channels that they currently have.
No. And
which has been heavily corrupt.
Exactly. Yeah. And he says that about Russia also. So he, you know, now kind of bring that back, because that has Canadian implications. Right. So on the same, on our, you know, we're in the Western Hemisphere too. You know, we're in North America. So, you know, it does have ramifications for us, because this is kind of signaling to where he wants things to go. So he wants control of major resources that are being sold to China or to Russia. And he said that point blank.
Well, look at the position we're put into. Now he's got all the oil he needs for anything diesel, all heavy oil, heavy crude, arriving to his country, driving down the price in the market that we need to sell into dramatically. I mean, when you get oil for free, it's hard to compete with that.
Yep.
And I get it. It's reparations for what had happened in Venezuela, but that instantly has a huge dynamic in that marketplace. There's no two ways about it. Canada's going to suffer this. So now we need to go to other countries. And right now, as we record this, I believe our prime minister is either in or on the way to China. In that document that Trump put out, the new national defense strategy, it basically says our partners in this hemisphere will not do business with Russia, will not do business with China. Meanwhile, we're there trying to set up new trade channels and being told this by the U.S. How does that sit?
Well, the second part of the Monroe Doctrine is control strategic assets, infrastructure, and supply chains. So they come right out and they say in this document, you're going to trade with us at our pricing. It will be higher, but the price of safety and security is worth it. And the fact that we're in the Western Hemisphere as your strategic partner, you'll trade with us.
Right.
So a lot of that trade with other nations, and whether it be Europe, China, Australia, again,
do you mind if we follow that trail for a second?
Sure.
Just one sec. So now we're starved out of the marketplace in the U.S. by oil coming in from Venezuela. We're not allowed to trade with China or Russia. Maybe that goes to the U.S., but we're not going to make money on that.
Yes.
Where does that leave us economically in this culture of hemispheric control?
I hate to, and I traditionally don't really agree with much of Premier Eby's sentiments, but quite frankly, he had an interesting concept the other day, and he said, which I've been a big fan of for years: build a refinery in Canada and start to sell your oil inland.
Well, the other thing that somebody pointed out, that's a fantastic solution. If we start to use our own oil, that's a massive boost for our nation.
Yeah.
And the other thing in that is, okay, if we don't have the right fuel refining done, or we don't have the right oil, it doesn't prevent us from trading with other nations commodities.
Right.
There doesn't have to be a purchase made. There can be actual barter made between countries of, well, our fuel's good for this and your fuel's needs are so that I still think is a possibility. Sale into those markets and long-term deals into China and Russia, I think, are the main concerns.
Right. Yeah, it all depends. Again, anything outside of the Western Hemisphere, whoever we're dealing with, they want a view on.
Yeah.
So the U.S. wants an active view into. The last key point is use military, economic, and diplomatic pressure to enforce alignment. So the question you had before about, the fact that he didn't consult Congress before going into Venezuela. He moves on Colombia with statements, and now I noticed this morning they're having conversations in Greenland, and they're having conversations in Colombia with the president right now. So he's actively moving forward, saying, this is what I can do. This is the alignment I want. Align, or I will actively move through the following. So whether it's sanctions, whether it's military, I will align. And so,
even to the point of, I'll find a way to illustrate your government as corrupt and remove the current infrastructure.
yes.
That's the threat that's out there. Regardless of what anybody thinks, that's the threat that he now has in his back pocket. Venezuela is also a calling card. Don't forget what I did in Venezuela. I'll do it here too.
Yeah. And he's left a lot of the infrastructure of Venezuela and the politicians in place, telling them, basically, you better make this work now as I guide you through it, or else, we will start to remove people. But he's learned from the Middle East some of the lessons that they made mistakes on, and he's not going in and just wiping out the whole regime and trying to put a new one in. So I think there's some lessons learned. We'll see how that goes. But as you look at this, you're saying, okay, so now gone into Venezuela and you've aggressively taken over. You've used the Monroe Doctrine. You've enacted it. You've gone in, just like you said you would. But does that put you at conflict in other regions now?
You would think probably it does.
So Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan. So is it really, so now you're looking at it, you're thinking to yourself,
should you even be there if this is not your hemisphere?
Exactly. And are you kind of sucking and blowing because, you just went in and did what you did. They've kind of done the same thing in their hemispheres.
Yeah.
Or are doing the same things. And so quite frankly, it puts him a little bit at odds on the next move. So, and I think the criticism that he has to watch out for is, okay, now let's pull out of here because we're here. The other interesting part of this, which I thought, NATO, and, there's a lot of discussion from other members saying, as long as they follow international law and all this stuff, he's willing, in a statement yesterday, I'll work with NATO. I'll make contributions to NATO, but I'm not obligated to NATO anymore.
Yeah, I'm not beholden to NATO's decisions, because certainly not in his hemisphere, his empire.
Exactly. So he's very blunt about it. He's been, and I think this morning it was interesting, and I should have brought it with me, and I'll put it up on the show. They published a list, the U.S. government, a list of associations and companies that they will no longer support or be associated with, which was very interesting, because
it's a very hard line in the sand, right?
Yeah, they're saying, okay, we're no longer going to abide by this association, and it all had around China decoupling. It was a lot of that had to do with,
which is a huge part of the national defense strategy.
Exactly, very big, and basically forcing allies within the Western Hemisphere to work cooperatively on trade. So it's starting to, you're starting to see a clear path and a clear decision matrix there. The other one that we don't talk about, which we should be talking about, in the defense paper, the national security strategy, they do talk specifically about Arctic sovereignty. So they're very, they emphasize the freedom of navigation and hemispheric control provides a framework under which the U.S. military and commercial vessels could transit the Northwest Passage without any consent.
Right. So it allows them access around the entire hemisphere.
Yes.
Because they're allowed, of course, Ushuaia at the bottom is their net last outpost, I believe, and that gives them a full protective moat, if you will, around the hemisphere.
Right. So that's, the discussion now on Greenland. I think Marco Rubio is actually there this week or next week to start the discussion on moving forward for the acquisition or takeover of Greenland. Or he's in Denmark, I think he went to.
I believe that. Yeah. And so what do you think, just what's your feeling? Greenland goes with this, or?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I don't think there's any, I think there's a very nice, blunt conversation. And I think Greenland is moving.
They feel like they're moving in the direction of accepting it, to be honest with you. It's been, I mean, it's not of the general public, but of the economy forecast for them is so much better in this that it's hard not to look at it. But the truth is, I don't know that Greenlanders overall are thrilled. If he does this, what does that mean for Canada?
Well, it definitely means more Arctic control, right? So it does mean, quite frankly, that there'll be more involvement. And, we have the outstanding issue of oil, as you mentioned, whether it's, Alberta. And quite frankly, Alberta has a lot of issues right now that they have to deal with. They understand that every barrel of oil that is actually made in Venezuela impacts them.
Right.
And, the show you did with Dan was very interesting. If the price of oil falls any further,
we're out of the game.
We're definitely out of the game.
Yeah.
So, and if
there's no point drilling. I mean,
No.
Even some of our facilities are failing now because there's not the money to put into scaling them or even repairing them.
Yes.
So it's a frightening time, but the empire building that we're seeing going on is happening really quickly, Paul.
Yeah. So, I think that's where we have to watch.
Caesar would be impressed.
But, the speed of which, empires are built are, only are curtailed by the ability to move and commute. And nowadays, quite frankly, the transportation and the vehicles and the military force that they have assembled, look how fast they got into just outside of Venezuela.
Moments.
11 warships, landed. And that was to land 200 people for an invasion to get a president on a late night incursion. So, how fast could they?
And it feels to me like they were ready to do it and then curtailed it by several hours or days, a couple days, and then went for it again. So they actually, how quickly they could even pivot to do this was remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the speed with which you can move your military is the speed with which you can enact. So quite frankly, if they have a discussion with Greenland and that doesn't go well, do they just start to move military towards Greenland and then at that point, they say, okay, we're going to shut off some supply chains to you.
We have Nick Maduro on the phone. He wants to tell you something.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting case, but I think we have to, as Canadians, start to pay attention to it. I think we start off with tariffs, and that's why before Christmas, when the national security paper came out, the strategy, I said, we really have to pay attention to this. And, it was over Christmas, I was talking to people, don't worry about it, tariffs. And I'm like, I don't think we're at tariffs now.
No, we've kind of moved beyond that.
Yeah, tariffs are one piece of it.
Trump has the ability to, in advance, right in front of your face, lay landmines.
Yeah.
The tariffs were one of the landmines.
Sure.
Another one was the drug trafficking and the crime in Canada.
Right.
There's another landmine. And you know that those are going to come up because I don't think he has the capacity to think outside the box of what his actual plan is. And he can't keep quiet about it long enough to actually execute it. I'm sure they have to tie him down when they're doing military maneuvers. But he does give you the clues, like, I'm going to do this. We're starting with tariffs.
Yes.
Nobody wants tariffs, but we can't do it for free anymore.
Yeah.
So we're being told you can't have free security anymore, Canada. He means it.
Yeah. Well, end of free security was one of the strategy issues. Coming in and protecting countries and putting all the money into NATO and doing all this, that's over now.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we're kind of slowly saying, okay, we got to put money into defense. We have to. Our pace has to, if we're going to keep our sovereignty and we're going to keep going as Canada as we are today, we have to speed our defense strategies. We have to figure out some leadership with respect to oil and gas, and whether it's refining or pipeline. Like, I think we got caught up in waiting. We're like, okay, I'm not sure it's going to happen.
We sit around sucking our thumbs all the time. This is not the moment.
I think we thought, okay, this isn't going to happen. And, he published this paper. We all read it. We all went for Christmas. Everyone took a break, came back. He didn't take a break.
Oh.
So I don't know if people noticed. So, that Venezuela, the capture of the president was, I think I read somewhere, it was originally scheduled for Christmas Day.
Good God.
Yeah. No,
it sounded like it had been rescheduled. Yeah.
Around. And because of weather, it got rescheduled.
Oh, okay.
So there was some.
So his original plan was, no, we work 365 here to make this hemisphere.
Yeah. They were working straight through the holidays to get there. That's, so in the new year, I think, probably I'd have to say the summer, they were probably planning this. So last summer, they were probably putting it into play. The strategy was being written. And so the layout of what's going to happen next is in play. So for those people who are sitting up saying, well, what's going to happen next, they'll just decide. I really don't think it's going to happen that way. I think it's laid out for those of you who get a chance. We'll put it on our site. Read the 2025 U.S. National Security Strategy, please. And
print out a map. In fact, we'll make one available there too.
Yeah, the Western Hemisphere.
The Western Hemisphere map, because you'll see. My first thought when I looked at that map was, we could be self-sufficient. We have all the food, all the oil, all the minerals, all the advanced societal comforts that we need in that hemisphere. It doesn't seem unreasonable in my mind now that I've taken a look at what's available within our own ecosystem if we do it this way.
Right. But think about it for a minute, Mike. The U.S. sat down, they created a national security strategy. They published it. They've planned it, executed part of it. We have to do the same. So we need a strategy for ourselves. We need an execution plan, and we need to move.
Why aren't we moving in tandem with the U.S. and saying, okay, look, we want to keep our sovereignty. What do you need from us to keep everybody happy? Instead, we go and we fight. I don't understand. Or we ask for deals, or we wait in line for economic reparation of our tariffs.
Well, we think this is only about tariffs. Yeah. That's the problem. I think we're a little bit blindsided, thinking this is just a tariff discussion. This is a Kuzma discussion. It's bigger than those. So the control of the Western Hemisphere is their objective. It's not singly focused on tariffs are a tool, but that's not the single discussion. I think that's where we're missing, missing the forest for the trees.
What will be convincing on this, Paul, is if they start to pull out of their Middle East interests, which they kind of like. Even in Israel right now, they have what seems to be a quiet silence. In the Ukraine, he's not exactly always getting along with Zelensky. It almost feels like maybe he will start to withdraw from some of these places. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's interesting you say that, because in the strategy paper, so it argues that the Middle East should no longer dominate U.S. foreign policy as U.S. energy position improves and conflict dynamics change. So it basically says we shouldn't focus on the Middle East. So as you're saying it, you're noticing it.
Yeah.
The paper talks about it.
Says don't be so concerned over there. In our own hemisphere, we have everything we need.
Seek strategic stability with Russia and an expedited end to the Ukrainian war to reduce escalating risk and stabilize Europe.
And then we go home.
Yes. So he's spelling it out. He's spelling out what he's doing. Whether it be Africa, Middle East, Europe, Asia, he's spelling it out. He puts it right. He puts it in the strategy paper. He tells you where he's going, and he's going.
Is that still posted, by the way, Christoph? Your read through of that?
Yes.
I'm going to recommend people go and have a listen to it and the document is there as well. Because you're right. It seems to be the roadmap for Trump and for his empire.
Well, again, now it's an empire. He doesn't have to go back to Congress. He's told Congress what this is, just for the viewers. He's told the Congress his strategy.
Here it is.
No one said no. It's published.
Here we go.
Here we go. And, having spent time, lived in the U.S., did business, the one thing I admired all the time is strategically, when they decide to go in a direction, they do go in a direction very rapidly.
Right.
Yeah. Unlike Canada, which, we have regulations and red tape, and we tend to spend a lot of time schmoozing about why or if it's the best thing to do. And we kind of argue and debate a lot. We then end up doing it. But, we're not aggressively moving in an execution mode when we get a strategy in play. That's not our culture.
Well, you have to admit the last 10 years wouldn't give somebody with this strategy a lot of confidence that their neighbor to the north is ready to participate. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
If I was Trump and I was putting this plan out and this was my strategy, and I looked to Canada and I saw the last 10 years of what we've done to ourselves here, I would be a little nervous to be doing business with us.
Yeah. Well, the signaling coming out of the U.S. as far as, the last 10 years aren't great, right? Because, they do talk about, I was listening to Ron DeSantis the other night. He was talking about Canada and the Trudeau era and, talking about Marxism and all kinds of, I didn't agree with what he was saying, but, that's obviously.
That's the perception that.
It's in his speak, and it's, they are talking that way more and more you're hearing about it. They're hearing about our coupling with, China. And so, they're talking about it. It's on their radar. They're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, this is an interesting thing. And I think we'll probably keep an eye on this. This document seems to be the roadmap that we need to keep an eye on as Canadians as well. So I appreciate you taking me through it and having this discussion, because my first thought was, hey, Donald Trump can't just go and do that. As it turns out, that's the strategy. Build an empire.
Build an empire.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.